1 Kings chapter 14. Curse in the house of Jeroboam. At that time, Abijah, Jeroboam's son, fell sick. Jeroboam said to his wife, "Please go, disguise yourself so they won't recognize you as Jeroboam's wife, and go to Shiloh. Look, the prophet Ahijah, who told me that I would be king over these people, is there. Take with you 10 loaves, biscuits, and a jar of honey, and go to him. He will tell you what will happen to the boy." Jeroboam's wife did so. She got up and went to Shiloh and came to the house of Ahijah. Now Ahijah could not see, for his eyes were dim because of his age. Adonai had said to Ahijah, "Look, Jeroboam's wife is coming to ask you about her son, for he is sick. You are to say such and such to her, for she will be in disguise." As soon as Ahijah heard the sound of her feet as she came through the door, he said, "Come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why the disguise? But I have been sent to you with a difficult message. Go to Jeroboam. Go tell Jeroboam. Thus says Adonai, God of Israel. I tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you, yet you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commandments and followed me with all his heart, not doing only what was right in my eyes. Instead, you have done more evil than all those who were before you, and of God, and made yourself other gods, molten images, to vex me, and have cast me behind your back. Therefore, I am about to bring evil on the house of Jeroboam. I will cut off to Jeroboam even one man, bond and free in Israel. I will burn up the house of Jeroboam as one burns the dung until it is all gone. Anyone who belongs to Jeroboam and dies in this city, the dog will eat, and anyone who dies in the field, the birds of the sky will eat, for Adonai has spoken it. As for you, arise and go to your house as soon as you set foot in the town. The boy will die. All Israel will lament over him and bury him, for it is only him of Jeroboam's house who will be buried, because in him alone of all Jeroboam's house something good was found toward Adonai, the God of Israel. Moreover, Adonai will raise up for himself a king over Israel, who will cut off the house of Jeroboam that day. So now, what else? Adonai will strike Israel until it sways like a reed in the water. He will uproot Israel from this good land that he has given to their fathers, and will scatter them beyond the river, because they have made their Asherah poles, provoking Adonai. So he will give up Israel because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he committed and caused Israel to commit. Then Jeroboam's wife got up, left, and went to Tirzah. As soon as she stepped over the threshold of the house, the child died. They buried him, and all Israel lamented over him, just as was the word of Adonai that he spoke through his servant Ahijah the prophet. As for the rest of the deeds of Jeroboam, how he made the war and how he reigned, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. The days that Jeroboam reigned were 22 years, and then he slept with his fathers. His son Nadab reigned in his place. Idolatry and consequences. Meanwhile, Rehoboam, son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he became king, and reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city where Adonai had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess. Judah did what was evil in Adonai's eyes. They provoked him jealousy with more than all their forefathers had done with the sins that they had committed. They also built for themselves high places, sacred pillars, and Asherah poles on every high hill under every leafy tree. And there were also male cult prostitutes in the land. They did the same abominations as those of the nations that the Adonai had driven them out before the children of Israel. Now it came to pass in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, King Shishak of Egypt marched against Jerusalem. He took away the treasures of the house of Adonai and the treasures of the royal palace. He took away everything, even taking all the golden shields that Solomon had made. So King Rehoboam made in their place bronze shields and committed to them the hands of the captains of the guard, watching over the doorway of the royal palace. Whenever the king went to the house of Adonai, the guard would carry them and bring him back into the guard room. Now the rest of the deeds of Rehoboam and all that he did, they are not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Judah. Are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? There was a war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. Then Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried with his father in the city of David. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonite. Then his son Abijah became king in his place. 1 Kings chapter 15. Now in the 18th year of the king of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, Abijah became king over Judah. He reigned 3 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. He walked in all the sins of his father, which he had done before him, and his heart was not wholly devoted to Adonai his God, like the heart of his father David. Nevertheless, for David's sake, Adonai his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, raising up his son after him and establishing Jerusalem. For David did what was right in Adonai's eyes, and did not turn aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. as there had been war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days of his life, so there was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. The rest of the deeds of Abijam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? Then Abijam slept with his father, so they buried him in the city of David, and his son Asa became a king in his place. Asa starts out right. In the 20th year of the King Jeroboam of Israel, Asa began to reign over Judah. He reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. Now Asa did what was right in Adonai's eyes, like his father David. He also expelled the male prostitutes from the land and removed all the idols that his fathers had made. Also he deposed his mother Maacah from being queen mother, because she had made an abominable image as an Asherah pole. So Asa cut down her image and burned it in the Kidron Valley, but they did not take away the high places. Nevertheless, Asa's heart was wholly devoted to Adonai all his days. He brought into the house of Adonai the consecrated things of his father, as well as his own consecrated things of silver, gold, and utensils. Now there was a war between Asa and King Baasah of Israel all their days. King Baasah of Israel marched against Judah, and he built up Ramah to prevent anyone from going out or coming in to King Asa of Judah. Then Asa took all the silver and the gold that were left in the treasury of Adonai's house and the treasuries of the royal palace, and delivered them into the land of his officials. King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, son of Tabramman, son of Hezion, king of Aram, who resided in Damascus, saying, "Let there be a treaty between me and you, as it was between my father and your father. I have just sent you a present of silver and gold. Go, break your treaty with King Baasah of Israel, so that he may withdraw from me." So Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel, conquering Ijon, Dan, Abel-Beth-Maacah, and all Chinneroth, as well as all the land of Naphtali. When Baasah heard it, he sought fortifying Ramah and remaining Tirzah. Then King Asa made a proclamation to all Judah, none was exempted, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber, which Baasah had built. Then King Asa built Gibeah of Benjamin and Mizpah with them. Now the rest of all the deeds of Asa, all his might, all he did in the cities that are built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And in his old age he was diseased in his feet. He and King Asa slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of his father David, and his son Jehoshaphat became king in his place. End of Jeroboam's line. Nadab, son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the 2nd year of King Asa of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. He also did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, walking in the way of his father, and his sins that caused him Israel to commit. Then Baasah, son of Ahijah, of the house of Issachar, conspired against him, and Baasah struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, while Nadab and all of Israel was besieging Gibbethon. So Baasah slew him in the 3rd year of King Asa of Judah, and became king in his place. As soon as he became king, he struck down all the household of Jeroboam. He did not spare Jeroboam anything with breath until he had destroyed him, just as was the word that Adonai had spoke by the hand of his servant Ahijah the Shilonite. Because of the sins Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit, by which he utterly provoked Adonai, God of Israel. Now the rest of the deeds of Nadab and all he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Israel? So there was war between Asa and King Baasah of Israel all their days. In the 3rd year of King Asa of Judah, Baasah, son of Ahijah, began to reign over all Israel and Tirzah, reigning 24 years. He did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, and he followed the way of Jeroboam and the sin that he had made Israel commit. 1 Kings chapter 16. Zimri ends Baasah's line. Now the word of Adonai came to Jehu, son of Hanani, against Baasah, saying, "Since I raised you up from the dust and made you ruler over my people of Israel, yet you have walked in the way of Jeroboam and have caused my people Israel to sin, vexing me with their sins, I am about to consume Baasah and his house. I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. Anyone of Baasah who dies in the city, the dogs will eat, and anyone of his who dies in the fields of the birds of the sky, they will eat." Now the rest of the deeds of Baasah and what he did in his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Then Baasah slept with his fathers and was buried in Tirzah, and his son Elah became his king in his place. But the word of Adonai had already come by the hand of the prophet Jehu, son of Hanani, against Baasah and against his house, because of all the evil he had done in Adonai's eyes, vexing him with the work of his hands, becoming thus like the house of Jeroboam, which he had struck down. In the 26th year of King Asa of Judah, Elah, son of Baasah, became king over Israel and Tirzah, and reigned 2 years. Then his servant Zimri, commander of half of his chariotry, conspired against him while he was in Tirzah, making himself drunk in the house of Arza, who was in charge of the palace of Tirzah. Then Zimri went in, struck him down, and killed him in the 27th year of King Asa of Judah, and became king in his place. It came about when he became king, as soon as he sat on the throne, he struck down all the household of Baasa, leaving him not even one man, nor his kinsman, nor his friend. So Zimri destroyed the entire house of Baasa, according to the word of Adonai, which he spoke against Baasa the prophet Jehu, for all the sins of Baasa and the sins of his son Elah, which they committed, and caused Israel to commit, vexing Adonai, God of Israel, with their useless idols. Now the rest of the deeds of Elah, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? The rise of Omri. In the 27th year of King Asa of Judah, Zimri reigned for 7 days in Tirzah. Now all the people were encamped against Gibbethon of the Philistines. When the people encamped heard it said, Zimri has conspired and even struck down the king, then all that Israel proclaimed Omri, the commander of the army, king over Israel that very day in the camp. Then Omri and all Israel went up with Gibbethon and besieged Tirzah. When Zimri saw that the city was captured, he went into the citadel of the royal palace and burned down the royal palace over him with fire. So he died too, because of the sins which he committed, doing what was evil in Adonai's eyes, walking in the way of Jeroboam, and in the sin which he had committed, making Israel sin. Now the rest of the deeds of Zimri and his treason that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Then the people of Israel were divided into 2 factions. Half of the people followed Tibni, son of Ginath, making him king, while the other half followed Omri. But the people followed Omri prevailed against the people following Tibni because of Ginath. Tibni died, and Omri became king. In the 31st year of the king Asa of Judah, Omri began to reign over Israel, and reigned 12 years, 6 years in Tirzah. Then he brought the hill of Samaria from Shemar for 2 talents of silver, and bought the city on the hill. He named that city he built Samaria, based on the name Shemir, the owner of the hill. But Omri did what was evil in Adonai's eyes, and acted more wickedly than all who were before him, for he walked in all the ways of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and in the sins that he had caused Israel to commit, vexing Adonai, God of Israel, with their useless idols. Now the rest of the deeds of Omri that he did, and the valiant deeds that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Omri slept with his fathers and was buried in Samaria. Ahab, even worse. Then his son Ahab became king in his place in the 38th year of the king Asa of Judah. Ahab's son of Omri began to reign over Israel, and Ahab son of Omri reigned over Israel and Samaria 22 years. But Ahab son of Omri did what was evil in Adonai's eyes more than all who were before him. Now as if it was a trifling thing to walk in the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, he also took as wife Jezebel the daughter of King Ethbaal of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. He also erected an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal, and that he had built in Samaria. Also Ahab made the Asherah pole. So Ahab yet did more to provoke Adonai, the God of Israel, than all the kings of Israel who were before him. The curse of Jericho rebuilt. During his days, Hiel of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. At the cost of Abiram, his firstborn, he laid its foundation. And at the cost of his youngest son Segub, he set up its gates, according to the word of Adonai, which he had spoken through Joshua son of Nun. 1 Kings chapter 17. Elijah proclaims famine. Now Elijah the Tishbite, one of the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab, As Adonai God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be no dew or rain these years, except at my word. And the word of Adonai came to him, saying, Leave this place, turn eastward, and hide yourself by the Wadi Cherith, east of the Jordan. It will come about that you will drink from the wadi. I have also commanded that the ravens to feed you there. So he went and did according to the word of Adonai. So he went and lived by the Wadi Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. The ravens kept bringing him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the wadi. Then it came to pass that after a while that the wadi dried up, because there was no rain in the land. Then the word of Adonai came to him, saying, Arise, go to Zarephath of Sidon, and stay there. I have just commanded a widow there to provide for you. The miracle of the flour and oil. So he arose and went to Zarephath. Now when he came to the town gate. To his surprise, a widow was there gathering sticks. So he called to her and said, Please bring a little water in a jar that I may drink. As she was going to fetch it, he called to her and said, Please bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. So she said, As Adonai lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in the jar, and a little oil in the jug. Now look, I am gathering a couple of sticks, that I may go in and prepare for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, Fear not, go and do as you said, but first make me a little cake from what you have there. Bring it out to me, and afterwards make some for you and for your son. For thus says Adonai, God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be exhausted, nor shall the jug of oil be empty, until the day Adonai sends rain on the land. So she went in and did according to the word of Elijah, and she and he and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not exhausted, nor did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of Adonai, which he spoke through Elijah. The resurrection of a boy. After these things it came to pass that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick, and his sickness was getting much worse until he had no breath left in him. So she said to Elijah, What do I have to do with you, man of God? Have you come to me to remind me of my sin and kill my son? He said to her, Give me your son. Then he took him from her arms, carried him up to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his own bed. He cried out to Adonai and said, Adonai, my God, have you brought such evil even on the widow with whom I am staying by causing her son to die? Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times. He cried out to Adonai and said, Adonai, my God, please let this child's soul come back into his body. Adonai listened to the cry of Elijah, so the soul of the child came back into the body, and he was revived. Then Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper room into the house, and gave him to his mother. Elijah said, See, your son is alive. And the woman said to Elijah, Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word in your mouth is truth.